Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Chit Chat with Cass. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to this podcast and to share your thoughts with me, of course. It is greatly appreciated. Today we are back with another DC comic themed episode. So in episode 6, I talked all about my favorite DC characters. I did grow up with more of the DC comics instead of the Marvel. Actually, most of my Marvel knowledge comes from the films. So in thinking to my favorite characters, quite a few of them, if not all of them, are from DC. So when I was doing that DC episode, I thought to Batman a lot. He has been a favorite character of mine, and I've always watched all of the TV shows, the movies, the cartoons, and so on, pretty much anything relating to Batman, Bruce Wayne, or the whole Bat family, if you will. So something to me that has Batman so obviously different from other superheroes are his villains. Batman has some incredible villains, so many good ones. So I decided I really wanted to do a dedicated episode to some of my favorite Bat villains. So not only do we have hundreds of great villains for Batman, most of them are not easily matched to him. Now what I mean is, with a lot of superheroes you see a villain that is the same as the hero, just a bad guy. What I mean is like Superman having a villain from Krypton, so they are evenly matched with their powers, or the Flash going up against a Reverse Flash, and things of that nature. Now don't get me wrong, I do enjoy those heroes and those villains as well, but I do feel like Batman villains are set apart. Gotham is just a very crazy place with a shit ton of crazy people. People with powers, some people without powers, and so on. Just a great mix of characters within the Batman villains. And no one is, exactly like Batman. It's not an even matchup, if you will, which I think makes for a more interesting story when you're not, going the same head to head. Looking through all the Bat bad guys, I compiled a list of my go-to Batman villains, going through multiple sources really, TV shows, movies, comics, books, cartoons, and so on. As I said, Batman and the Bat family has been a part of my childhood and up into adulthood. So I have a list here of about 10 villains that I decided to talk about for today's episode. If you aren't familiar with Batman's storylines, there is the potential that there may be some brief spoilers mixed in here, but hopefully nothing too over the top. These are in no particular order, so let's just go ahead and jump right in. We will start with Harvey Dent, or better known as Two-Face. So Two-Face was introduced in 1942. So Harvey Dent, of course, started as the DA in Gotham, actually, I believe the youngest DA in Gotham, and was actually a friend to Batman for a time, as they tried to, work together to make Gotham a better place, if you will. So it does vary on how Harvey turned into Two-Face, really depending on what you were watching or reading. But the basic story is he had acid thrown into his face during a trial, which in turn left him scarred down the middle of his face, leaving him as Two-Face. Oftentimes it was Maroni, one of the big bads of Gotham, who actually threw the acid at him. But as I said, it does vary depending on the material or the reference for that version of Two-Face. As Two-Face, he basically had two personalities, the good side and the scarred side. This reflected in not only his face, but oftentimes his wardrobe would be, like two altering sides. A big thing for Two-Face as well was his coin. Being the two-sided person, his coin has two faces, but one is perfect and the other side is essentially all screwed up. This is something I really like about Two-Face and his character, his go-to of the coin to essentially make decisions. He flips the coin to basically decide if he will commit a crime, meaning the scarred face shows up, or that he will not do it, and the perfect side is face up, essentially. It's an important part of his mindset, or kind of playing off both two faces, two personalities, and so on. And that is something that I do tend to really like about Two-Face, is kind of the double sides to him. He also bounces off his dark side and his lawyer skills as well, which also makes for interesting stories. And in general, just makes me enjoy this take to a two-sided villain, if you will. We've seen Two-Face a few different ways, or portrayed by a few people, I mean. In the 89 Batman by Tim Burton, Harvey Dent was actually played by Billy D. Williams, but we never actually got to see his transformation into Two-Face. That was only the lawyer DA side of his character, which is too bad because I would have really liked to have seen that, but I do hear that he will be doing the voice of Two-Face in an upcoming animation, so at least he'll get to do something further with the character. We also had Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face in Batman Forever, which sadly was not good. I love Tommy Lee Jones. I'm a big fan of his, but the character was not at all portrayed correctly in that movie. Tommy Lee Jones was playing more of a Joker character compared to Two-Face. One of my most hated parts in that movie actually relates to Two-Face as well. He has the two-sided coin, as I mentioned, and he flips it to make his choice. But for some unknown reason, they had him continue to flip the coin until it landed on the scarred side. And that just annoyed me to no end because, like I said, him going to the coin to make decisions is part of the character that I really enjoy with Two-Face. So the fact that they had him just keep flipping the coin, it was just completely wrong for his character and it just irritated me. He used the coin to make the choice. If the coin said, don't do it, that was it. That was the choice, he moved on. He didn't stand there flipping it over and over again until he got the bad side. That would kind of defeat the purpose of flipping the coin in the first place. If you just want it to land on the scarred side, you might as well just kill the person and forget the coin altogether. More recently, we had Aaron Eckhart as Two-Face in The Dark Knight, but in that movie, you get way more Harvey Dent than you do Two-Face. The part was highly rushed in that movie, and you barely got any of the character at all, really, which I found to be an odd choice, especially with the villains we already had in that movie. So it's hard to say if I like his Two-Face because it was just truly so brief. But I will say I liked the special effects for that Two-Face look. While Tommy Lee Jones was very cartoony, Aaron Eckhart's version looked more realistic for someone who had essentially had acid on their face, and it looked creepy as well. So I did enjoy that part of that interpretation of Two-Face. Let's see, Richard Mull also did the voice of Two-Face, I believe, in the animated series, so I would most likely recognize his voice, as well as Christopher McDonald and William Shatner have also done the voice of Two-Face for various sources. And in the show Gotham, we also have introduced Harvey Dent, which is played by Nicholas DeGusto, and I probably just butchered his name, sorry. So clearly that show is a prequel series, so he is not Two-Face just yet. He is just the lawyer side of things. My favorite version of Two-Face is going to probably go to the animated series. That will be a trend in this episode because the animated series was my favorite Batman source growing up. Alright, so next up we have a character that has been altered and shifted a bit over the years, and that is Mr. Freeze. With a lot of his first introductions in around 1959, Mr. Freeze wasn't really a serious character. Even in the 1960s Batman show, the Freeze character had a few different names, a few backstories, and was even played by a couple different people. It wasn't actually until the Batman animated series where his backstory was altered and became the Mr. Freeze character that a lot of people know and reference today. It was in that episode where we got the origin story of Dr. Victor Freeze, who is trying experiments and tests with cryogenic freezing. His research is basically to help freeze or pause someone's fatal illness. This was solely created for his wife, Nora, who was dying at the time of his research and ended up being his main test subject, of course. But the sad part of the origin story goes that the funding of his research was cut, and in an accident he was exposed to some of the freezing equipment, which basically transformed Dr. Freeze's body into something different. cold-blooded, you could say, and he has to survive in the cold conditions. He can't be in normal temperatures anymore. He has to stay at the sub-zero temperature, hence his Mr. Freeze suit. So for the most part, everything has adapted this Mr. Freeze origin story. There are slight differences. Sometimes the plug was pulled on his wife. Other times, it's later discovered that she is still alive but frozen. And in some cases, he is still working on his research to help bring her back, essentially. So this origin story that the animated series created is why I like Mr. Freeze. He's actually a very sympathetic villain, if you will. He was just a doctor trying to, help save his wife, and things took a wrong turn for him, and this villain was created, you could say. I do tend to like the stories where his wife is still alive, and he continues to try and save her with any means necessary, basically resulting in his crimes around Gotham and so on. But like I said, this origin story is probably why he's one of my favorite Bat villains. The sympathy, perhaps, or the purpose for him being a villain, or just the combination of all that has him on my top villains list. Mr. Freeze has been voiced by a lot of different people. I'm more familiar with Michael Ansara, who did the animated series, and the movie Sub-Zero, which is a really great Mr. Freeze animated movie. It follows along the same lines of his research to save his wife. And there's also a lot of Barbara Gordon in that movie, So if you like Mr. Freeze and Batgirl, you should definitely check that movie out. On the 1960s show, as I said, the character was switched around a bit. But basically, the character was kind of played by 3 people: George Sanders, Odo Preminger, and Eli Wallach. But Mr. Freeze was never one of the main bad guys on the 60s show. And like I said, the character kind of shifted a little bit. I'm not even sure they outright called him Mr. Freeze. He had a couple different names on there. Of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger played Mr. Freeze in Batman and Robin, and it was an interesting take on Freeze. I'm not sure the casting was exactly right on that one. At least for me, I personally would just picture someone else for Victor Freeze. Maybe someone a little smaller, not so massive, perhaps. But once again, you keep with that same origin story of trying to cure his wife, continuing his research even after his accidents, and in that Mr. Freeze suit. Victor Freeze has also been introduced in the Gotham series as well, and he is played by Nathan Darrow on that. That version of Mr. Freeze seems a bit closer to the cartoon, and now the comics that have followed after the cartoon, of course. Just not so massive like Arnold. I should say that in some interpretations of this character, Victor's last name is more like Victor Fries, and Freeze is more of a nickname, and especially like the villain name for when he turns into full-on Mr. Freeze. Just once again kind of depends on the source material. Our next Bat villain tends to switch sides every now and again. Sometimes she's good, sometimes she's bad again. Perhaps considered a bit of an anti-heroine sometimes, but back and forth, but she is easily one of my favorites, and that is Miss Selina Kyle, aka Catwoman. Catwoman was introduced in like 1940, which is crazy. That was a while ago, but back then was known as just the Cat, I believe. Since then, there have been a variety of versions and, of course, interpretations of Catwoman. Versions include her being a simple cat burglar, or an orphan growing up on the streets of Gotham. Stories also depend on what Earth you are on in the DC universe, as Catwoman's character changes throughout the different DC Earths as well. But it is safe to say that she has changed and been reimagined as the years have gone on, along with her family, her background, and where exactly she comes from. She is quite often a great love interest for Batman, which is some of the storylines that I personally enjoy. In some work, Batman and Catwoman have a daughter named Helena, and that material is some of my favorites. I love that stuff. And I actually believe that Catwoman and Batman got married in a more recent comic. And I think I saw something like Batman introducing Catwoman to Superman and Lois, something like that. Catwoman's abilities also shift depending on what you're watching or reading. She is almost always an expert with like acrobatics or martial arts, and in most cases an expert thief, and has various skills with her like stealthiness, if you will. And of course her love for cats, or her feelings towards them, I suppose. Even like, featuring cat claws in some costumes, along with a whip most of the time. But in some versions of Catwoman, she is actually a bit of a meta-human. She's not just an expert with martial arts, she has like the heightened abilities that would make her more cat-like. There's just a vast amount of versions to Catwoman, and her being a meta is just one of them. Now, we have had several Catwomans over the years. In the 60s, we actually got 3 versions of Catwoman on the Batman TV show. We had Julie Newmar, Lee Merriweather, and Eartha Kitt. From there, you got the very famous Michelle Pfeiffer version of Catwoman from Batman Returns. I really do enjoy that version, and she looks amazing. There's some body goals for you, in that cat suit. And there's an example of where she's kind of hinted at being a meta with her, several lives and essentially coming back to life. She's not completely normal in that movie. We also have the Halle Berry version, but dear God, I really don't care for that Catwoman movie. And she's not even Selina Kyle in that. She's someone else. Just with the Catwoman name, I guess. More recently, we had Anne Hathaway in The Dark Knight Rises, which she wasn't too bad. More of the cat burglar arc for her, or just kind of working around bad guys version of Catwoman, not so much the meta version. On Gotham, we get a young Selina Kyle, played by Carmen B. Condova. Of course, she isn't a fully Catwoman as it is a prequel series, but you get to see the orphan on the street look at things, and sticking to her true nature, she kind of hops back and forth, good and bad, in her little kitten woman arc on that show. And of course, you get some Bruce and Selina interaction on there as well, which, as I said, I enjoy. I love Batman and Catwoman, Bruce and Selina. I'm all for it. But I do really enjoy her as young Selina. I can easily see her growing up and being Catwoman. I would love to see that one day. If she continues acting into adulthood, she would be a fantastic Catwoman because she is great as a young version, as Kitten Woman. And there's been a few voice works as well. I believe Adrienne Barbeau was the voice on the animated series. Selina is also on occasion considered part of the Bat family in the DC-verse, as well as related to the Birds of Prey, and of course the Sirens of Gotham, which is meant to be getting a movie coming out with the other 2 female Bat villains, but we'll be getting to them in a bit. I enjoy the variations to Catwoman and how she kind of sort of screws with Batman. And as I said, I'm a big fan of the 2 of them and their daughter Helena. Speaking of that arc, Catwoman was briefly shown and mentioned in the show Birds of Prey, but she didn't really make it that far, which is kind of the point of the show. It's focused more on their daughter, but you do get reference to her quite a bit, and she is a meta-human in that show also. Favorite version of Catwoman for me is probably just going to be Michelle Pfeiffer, because I really do enjoy that version in there. So next... riddle me this, riddle me that. Who's afraid of the big black bat? The Riddler, or Edward Nygma, was introduced in 1948 and is a very interesting villain. His main thing is, of course, riddles, clues, and questions. Question marks are usually always related to the Riddler, whether it's in his riddles or his various costumes. You see, I suck at riddles and clues sometimes, so I feel like I would fail horribly against the Riddler. Maybe that's why I find him to be a very interesting villain, and I have him on my favorites list, is because I feel like he would beat me. I would fail, I wouldn't get the riddles, I am not a superhero. He is very much a playful villain, you could say. Jokes and teasing for Batman, of course, but over the years he has gotten a little darker, which, tends to happen with a lot of comic characters, really. He's had more recent darker takes to him, if you will. Things like OCD added to his character, just massive amounts of obsessive compulsion, and in turn he ties that into his riddles, of course. Riddler is pretty much a genius, so his riddles are really to screw with Batman and his intelligence level. And with that genius also comes his skill, I guess you could say, for solving crimes, which kind of matches against Batman pretty well, or in a way he can prepare for what Batman is going to do next. Makes for interesting stories for the 2 of them, of course, and going up against each other. I do believe that there are some versions of Riddler's backstory that revolve around child abuse from his parents. Essentially, he was too smart for them, and they didn't believe him, or whatever their case was, and they would beat him. Pretty horrible stuff that would make you turn into a villain when you grow up. As for the people who have brought the character to life, the big one in the 60s was, of course, Frank Gorshin, where he was the Riddler on the Batman TV show. That's the Riddler I think of for the 60s Batman, but apparently we also had John Astin on that show as the Riddler. I honestly have no memory of this. You'd think I'd remember Gomez Addams as the Riddler, but I must have missed those episodes because I have zero memory of this. I was actually making this podcast outline and I saw his name online and I was like, he didn't play the Riddler. Why is his name listed? Nope, apparently he did. I YouTubed it. I watched him in a clip, and it kind of looked like Gomez Addams in a, Riddler jumpsuit. It was very odd. But either way, if you are talking about John Astin or Frank Gorshin on the 1960s show, it is definitely a more fun and playful Riddler. From there we go to the more famous role from Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey is a really over-the-top actor. In general, that's his acting style. He's more over the top. So in turn, his Riddler is, of course, very over the top as well. I actually kind of prefer the way he plays the character when he's Edward Nygma. And not so much after he transforms, you could say. Now, it's not horrible. It's really over the top. And I feel like if maybe he would have kept the Edward Nygma take on the character throughout the length of the film, it would have been closer to the character for me, maybe. I don't know. I need to watch that movie again. Haven't watched it in years. We also had the Riddler in the animated series, and he was more subdued, if I remember correctly. I think I remember him just, being more chill and just living in his smarts and his riddles for Batman. That voice was done by John Glover, which I find funny because I'm so used to him being Lex's dad on Smallville. And hell, he was even in Batman and Robin too. He must be a DC fan. But there's a variety of voice actors that have done Riddler as well. I do know that Matthew Gray Gubler did Riddler in Assault on Arkham, and I know him from Criminal Minds, so that was interesting, and I think he did a good job at kind of bringing his Riddler voice out, if you will. But my favorite Riddler actually comes from the show Gotham, and he's played by Corey Michael Smith, and is amazing. Of course, once again, it is the early years, but his portrayal of Riddler is what I think of when I think to this character. He's crazy, of course. Everyone in Gotham is crazy, guys. Even Batman is crazy. He dresses up as a bat, okay? But even though he's crazy, he is extremely smart and perfect for the idea of him really understanding crimes and so on. This version of Edward Nygma, you can really see him growing into the full-on Riddler years down the road and taking on Batman with his riddles, Just showing again how I like the variety of villains that Batman has to go up against, because they're all very different from each other and very different from Batman. Our next villain is Oswald Cobblepot or the Penguin. Let's see, the Penguin was introduced in 1941. Now, Penguin is a little different from some of the Bat villains, in the sense that he is more of a mobster-type criminal, you could say. The character is very much a criminal mastermind, and that shows in a variety of references and sources, but he is more of a chilled-out villain, you could say. A quiet villain, maybe. He is, of course, a villain, but his smarts and his mob vibes put a much different spin on things compared to some of the truly crazy people that Batman deals with. He has intelligence and almost an aristocratic personality to him, a more professional look to the outside world. So in a way, that aspect of the character makes things between him and Batman a little less tense, if that makes any sense. He runs his nightclubs or his side crime business, his business fronts, if you will, because he is a very good businessman, but he just does illegal things as well and just adds a bit of crime in there as well with his business. It is Gotham. Who would ever want to live in Gotham? Let's see. Most versions of the Penguin have the same look to him, short, fat, but always in a tuxedo, a top hat, white gloves, and so on, with that professional look to him, staying classy. That's just kind of the Penguin look. Of course, with his tricked out umbrellas as well. That's a big part to the character also. His different tricked out umbrellas to, screw with Batman, screw some things up around Gotham. You know how it goes. And, also his love for birds and things like that. His nickname is Penguin. Let's see. Burgess Meredith played the Penguin in the 1960s series. And he's a good Penguin. I do really like him. Once again, it's the 60s series, so it's a little bit more lighthearted and funny and comical. But when thinking to like the more classic Penguin look, that's pretty much what I envision. I picture him with his little tuxedo outfit, his hat, the cigarette, all of that jazz. I kind of picture the 60s version when I think to like the classic Penguin. Paul Williams was the voice for the animated series. God, there's like so many other voice actors as well. There's just so much Batman content out there, guys. There's cartoons, there's video games, there's just a mix of crazy amount of Batman content. A pretty notable performance is, of course, Danny DeVito in Batman Returns. Now, it needs to be said that this movie was highly Tim Burtonized, if that's a term. Now, I love Tim Burton, but it's a pretty dark movie, and a lot of people do say that he had no business making comic book movies, so just depends on your personal preference, I guess. I have said that I love Catwoman in this film, and that's true, but Penguin is all wrong, which is very unfortunate because Danny DeVito was like the perfect casting for Penguin. I could totally see him in the classic look for Penguin if it just wasn't so dark, but it just went so dark. He was like a scary motherfucker in that movie. He was on my list of childhood horrors, okay? He creeped me out as a kid. I still watch that movie because I watched everything Batman, but God, was he creepy. Like, he's biting people's noses off, and he's like all slimy in the sewer, and he's like looking out like drain pipes. Oh, hell no. He was creepy. They just took it so dark that he kind of lost the businessman, mobster, more professional aspect of his character, if you will. It just kind of lost the Penguin vibe and went off on a tangent. I don't think it's a great show of the character or how it's meant to be. And a lot of people go to that Penguin when in reality, Penguin is actually quite different compared to that. Of course, after that, more comics and more stories and more things like that did show a darker Penguin. I'm not entirely sure they went as dark as the Tim Burton movie did, but Penguin did get darker. But like I said, all of comic book characters have gotten darker over the years. Not everything is as happy and cheerful as the 1960s Batman show. That's just not how the world works anymore. Now, a great version of the Penguin is once again on Gotham. I'm not even caught up on this show yet, but guys, I love the entire cast and how they portray the Gotham characters. Young Oswald on that show is played by Robin Lord Taylor, and he is so much closer to what it should be. It's the young version once again, but he has the right businessman mindset, he's got the mobster connections, and I just feel like the character is more accurate on that show. Once again, I could see him growing up and being the full-on Penguin. Okay, let's see on my list here. Let's do a lady next. How about Dr. Pamela Isley, aka Poison Ivy? I love Poison Ivy and all of her craziness. So, Poison Ivy was introduced in 1966 and is basically known as an eco-terrorist. She is all about the plants, the environment, and of course, taking care of it. Even over humans, she cares more about the plants, of course. So she did just start as Dr. Isley, a scientist that was pretty brilliant and had genius level and intellect surrounding her field. She was just a very smart chick. So while her transformation does shift depending on what you are reading or watching, one of the origins of Poison Ivy goes that her fiancé basically poisoned her with ancient Egyptian artifacts. Inside the artifact was some ancient herbs. but Pamela didn't die. She basically survived and was transformed into Poison Ivy. That transformation does make her pretty much immune to pretty much any form of toxins. You know, that's a pretty nifty little power. Let's see, she used the toxins from the plants she works with and from her own bloodstream for her crimes as well, and all of her missions to protect nature and other things that may be important to her. Some comics actually suggest that she's more plant than human after her transformation, which would make sense because she does care more for the plants than she does humans. And considering her biology after the whole transformation, it's very possible that she could be more plant than human. She's also known for making love potions and using them on, you know, some pretty popular heroes in the DC universe. Of course, Batman and Robin, but even Superman's thrown in there a couple times. But she herself also produces, like, the pheromones that in some versions can make people, like, susceptible to mind control around her. Poison Ivy is very much a seductive temptress, and she's very aware of her beauty, and she uses it to her advantage, which it's for the distraction or to get close enough to use her pheromones. She works those seductive vibes to herself. Ivy is part of the Gotham Sirens, so she should be included in that upcoming movie. I do hope the casting on her is amazing. I've always just loved something about Ivy. I don't know, I'm obsessed with red hair, so maybe that's it, but I just really want to see a great casting for this upcoming movie. So being a Gotham Siren, that has her connections to Catwoman and Harley Quinn, which I will get to Harley in a bit, but they are actually pretty close throughout several sources. One of my favorite things about Ivy is how outspoken she is to Harley about the Joker. She flat out tells her over and over again how horrible the Joker is and how, yes, he is extremely abusive. Because if you think that Harley and Joker are relationship goals, guys, trust me, they are not. They might have made them a little more better in Suicide Squad, but jeez. Go watch the cartoon or read a comic. He is horrible to her. But we'll get to that in a second. Basically, Ivy doesn't bullshit around that. She doesn't like the Joker, and she openly tells Harley this all the time. She doesn't want Harley anywhere near him. So they are pretty much like best friends. In some versions, they consider each other family. In other versions, Harley and Ivy are even in a relationship. So it just depends on what your source is, really. But like I said, I am looking forward to the Gotham City Sirens. Uma Thurman portrayed Poison Ivy in Batman and Robin, and she was okay. It's not like my dream casting, but I watched that movie a lot as a kid, and I've always loved her costumes and her performance. Ivy was also featured on the animated series, like some pretty good episodes, actually. Off the top of my head, I remember her screwing up, like, a wedding for Bruce on a boat or something. It was a good episode, but I need to rewatch the animated series, it seems. But then she is also on Gotham, but she's actually played by like 3 different people on Gotham. Long story, she ages fast and so on. I don't think any of them are horrible, but I'm still like waiting for that dream casting for Ivy, I guess you could say. Where I hear about the actress and I'm like, yes, that is who I want to see play Poison Ivy. Part of me thinks that they should like find an unknown, because a lot of the celebrity names that people tend to throw out there, I just don't care for. Like, Emma Stone is a big one. Like, everyone fan casts her as Poison Ivy. And I love Emma Stone, but I do not see her as Poison Ivy. I've also seen people mention Deborah Ann Wool for Ivy, which I feel like that's closer to who I would cast, but I don't know if it's spot on. I did love her on True Blood, and I hear she's pretty good in Daredevil stuff, so who knows? Time will tell on who they officially cast as the new Poison Ivy. Alright, so since I mentioned her, let's go ahead and jump into Harley Quinn now. So it's pretty interesting being a fan of Harley Quinn these days, because it is very popular. It's a huge trend after Suicide Squad came out. However, I've loved the character since seeing the animated series, and that is where she got her start. A lot of people don't seem to know that about Harley. So I've loved Harley for several years. Not just the last couple years like most people out there. So originally her name was Dr. Harleen Quinzel, and she was a psychiatrist at Arkham Asylum who was working with the Joker. You know, working to fix or help the Joker. Good luck with that. Long story short, she fell in love with him, and he basically turned to the dark side, you could say, and Harley Quinn was formed. I've always really enjoyed her backstory. I found it super interesting. It's always had that tie to Joker, obviously, but it also had the ties to Arkham and her being a psychiatrist. I just really enjoyed the character's backstory and kind of her fall into madness, you could say. Being very used to the animated version of Harley, I very much enjoyed the gesture outfit with the black and red colors. A lot of people today only relate the blue and pink to Harley because that's kind of what they went with for the Suicide Squad movie, but I prefer the classic gesture Harley look. Funny story, I actually had this commenter bitch me out on my main channel because I had done a Harley video dressed in black and red gesture look. And they basically bitched me out that I didn't know what the character was about because her colors were pink and blue. Actually, if you fully knew the character, you'd know what I was going for. Rude ass people. Do your research before you try and tell me how incorrect I am. But anyway, I have a love for Harley for a long time, but also found her sad at the same time. You know, it is sad, her fall to madness. Joker is an asshole. Like I said, listen to Ivy when she tells you how he treats you. Like, Poison Ivy's got it covered. I remember this episode of the animated series where the Joker, beats the crap out of her, and people seem to think that they're relationship goals for some reason. Joker isn't a nice guy, everyone. Now, in the new Suicide Squad movie, they kind of adjusted the relationship, I will admit that, but basically Joker is going after her to save her and does seem to care about her a bit more. And that is an adjustment because that would have never happened in the past stories or sources. He wouldn't have gave a damn about her. Like, oh, Harley got taken. Good for her. Never want to see her again. He wouldn't have cared. So they did adjust that for the Suicide Squad movie, so maybe that's why people think they're relationship goals. I still don't think they are. So while I love the character, it is sad to watch the doctor therapist fall so crazy in love that she lost herself a bit and is just treated so horribly. She needs to spend more time with Ivy, that's for sure. So Harley does use her psychiatry knowledge to help her along the way, as well as gymnastic skills as well. She's meant to be an exceptional gymnast, so that's pretty cool. Now, my first introduction to Harley was by Arlene Sorkin. She did the animated series voice, but there have been a few actors for Harley since then. I know that Tara Strong is a big one these days, but Harley did get her big break when they brought her to the big screen with Margot Robbie. Everyone was super excited to see Harley, myself included, and I do think that Margot did a great job with the character. I was very pleased with her performance as Harley, and I am looking forward to seeing her again in future movies like The Gotham Sirens, more Suicide Squad, and so on. Now, a lot of people think that that was her first live-action Harley introduction, but that actually goes to Mia Sara. She played a live-action Harley on the show Birds of Prey. While most of her performance is as Dr. Quinzel, she is very much Harley Quinn in that role, and she hops back and forth on the crazy train. So that was the first real version of Miss Harley Quinn. It wasn't Margot Robbie. Okay, next up we have a villain that I don't actually know much about compared to the rest of these people on the list, and that is Clayface. While looking up more about him for this episode, I discovered that there have been so many versions of this character. Clayface has been multiple people, and his origin story has changed so many times as well. My main introduction to Clayface was, of course, the animated series, and I found the idea of his abilities very interesting. So, on the animated series, Clayface was Matthew Hagen. He was basically an actor who would, after a car accident, his face was pretty badly injured. During his recovery, he was, staying in a burn unit, I believe, and was approached by a company that claimed to have a magic cure to get his looks back and fix his face. It was called Renew You, I believe, like a magic potion to fix all your worries. But the catch was, in exchange for this magic product, he had to impersonate people and basically commit a variety of crimes throughout Gotham. And that's how the character really starts off. Even at one point impersonating Bruce Wayne and screwing a bunch of stuff up. After a while, the product becomes super addictive, and when Matthew tries to steal more of it, he's basically punished for that. They essentially try and kill him by pouring like a shit ton all over him. Of course, that didn't work. It just kind of overdosed his body like on this stuff and turned him into the odd-shaped, clay-looking creature that is the more recognized Clayface. Now, he can for a short time still do the shape-shifting trick, like into anything or anybody that he wishes, but he doesn't like have that lasting forever, of course. So that was the basics of what I remember about Clayface from a few different sources. But like I said, there were so many other versions that I hadn't ever read about. And as I was putting this podcast together, I was looking it over and I just was like, wow, there's been quite a few versions of this guy. I don't know much about him, it seems. But I did include him on this list because I just think the whole like shape-shifting part of his abilities is very interesting and makes for a great power against Batman. Growing up, I was obviously watching the cartoons and I saw him, and I was also watching Birds of Prey, and that character has a role on that show as well, so I decided that I did want to include him on this Bat Villains list. Okay, our next villain has actually only been in like one main source material. I believe she may have briefly been mentioned in a few other things, but the main thing is just this one movie, and that is the Phantasm from Batman movie Mask of the Phantasm. So, fair warning, this little section here will have spoilers for that movie. Granted, that did come out in 1993, so you've had a bit of time to catch up. Mask of the Phantasm is one of my favorite Batman movies. I loved it as a kid, I still love it today as an adult, so of course I had to include the Phantasm on this list. So the Phantasm has two parts, of course. The Phantasm and the real person. That's where the spoilers come in. So her real identity is actually Bruce's ex-fiancé from a relationship before he was like really Batman. Her name is Andrea Beaumont. Her voice was done by Dana Delaney, and the Phantasm part was done by Stacy Keach. This movie and character is very Dexter themed, kinda, sorta, I guess. Basically, she goes after bad guys. Guys relating to the mafia, and ones that she blames for ruining some things relating to her family. So you have this vigilante of sorts going after these mafia bosses, and it makes for a very interesting villain and movie. Especially when you compare it with Batman. And the confusion of who the hell is this Phantasm? The Phantasm had some creepy parts, even for the cartoon, but being the odd child that I was, I loved it all. Now, the Phantasm doesn't have any powers or abilities, really. She was skilled in, like, combat and moves like that, if you will. Part of her costume does include, like, this creepy Phantasm look and, like, this big knife claw thing on her arm. And, of course, like, the fog that surrounds her, which just makes her look even creepier. Can't have a Phantasm without fog, of course. But I really enjoy the Phantasm and her backstory of why she's doing things. I'm a fan of Dexter-type characters, like going after the bad guy type of thing, where it's, like, questioned. It's like a Boondock Saints thing. Like, are they doing wrong because they're killing the bad guys? Like, should it be just left to the law enforcement? Should it be this? Should it be that? And that's kind of, like, Batman's thoughts throughout it, is, like, should he stop her because she's killing people, but what's her motive? It's a really good movie. If you guys haven't seen Mask of the Phantasm, you should most definitely see it if you're a Batman fan. Alright, we have come to the final villain, the big bad of Gotham, if you will, and you've probably guessed it. It is the Joker. The Joker has so many references. Like, holy shit, so many. So the Joker really is the arch enemy of Batman. He is also the big bad villain in comics, TV shows, books, movies. Joker is the big bad of Gotham. And with such a big character comes so many different versions of this character. Because trust me, no one's Joker is really the same as the other. Can you guess which one is my favorite? Joker was introduced in 1940. He is, of course, a master criminal and is probably the most infamous criminal in Gotham. To the point that other villains, they're kind of afraid of him or not wanting to work with him because he is, in fact, batshit crazy. I mentioned Poison Ivy not liking him earlier, and that really relates to her friendship with Harley. She doesn't want her best friend anywhere near Joker. She knows how crazy he is and how horrible he is to Harley. And some other villains just flat out will not work with him because they don't trust him, they think he's too crazy, they don't like his plans against Gotham. Even the villains know that Joker is a bad choice. I'm sure that most of you know, but on the off chance you don't, the Joker has always had like the clown-like appearance, which in the beginning was like, like the trickster type vibe that the Joker had. But as time moved on, we had more people being scared of clowns. So that image of the Joker got much darker. I mean, the Joker has been portrayed as a goofy jokester type character, all the way to a violent psychopath. There are different degrees to this character. Well, to each version, you could say. Joker has had some pretty horrible acts over the years, or like caused some shitty tragedies in Batman's life, like shooting Barbara Gordon, aka Batgirl, and paralyzing her and basically putting her in the wheelchair. He was also responsible for the death of Jason Todd, that was the second Robin in the Bat family, and other murders and crazy crimes that go along with him too. In that Birds of Prey series that I mentioned, he was pretty much the cause of Selina Kyle's death, and that was his goal, to hurt Batman by killing her. Now, the Joker has never really had a set-in-stone backstory or origin. It has been hinted at or referenced in some sources, like The Killing Joke. That's a pretty big Joker comic, and now they made it into a cartoon as well. They do reference a potential origin for the Joker in that one, with losing his wife and him going a bit crazy. But really for each Joker, he almost has his own history, his own story to go with, if you will. Like, it's just different for each version. Most takes of the Joker have to do with falling into chemicals, that good old Ace chemicals. This in turn turns his skin white, his hair green, things like that. But other versions just have it as makeup for that clown look. Once again, just depends on which version you got. Same goes with the smile. Sometimes it's face-painted smile, other times it's an injury or a cut that gives him that smile. There's actually one version where the Batarang actually scarred his cheeks, and that's how he got the cuts to form that smile look. Now, the Joker is said to be very intelligent. I mean, just because he's crazy doesn't mean he's not smart. He does go up against Batman quite often and, gets away from time to time, or escapes Gotham, or has all these master plans against Gotham. He is an intelligent villain. In some things he is skilled in combat and stuff, and other things he has little nifty gadgets to piss Batman off with. So diving into the versions, there's no way I can touch on every Joker reference. He is in so many comics and video games these days. I'm just going to stick to the main ones that I personally know. So first up we have Cesar Romero from the 1960s Batman show. This is the more fun and upbeat Joker, if you will. Of course, it's in the 60s, and this show is much, much more fun. The Joker is silly and more of a funny villain. His face is also painted in this, so much that Cesar Romero didn't, shave his mustache off. So it's funny if you watch it in, HD these days, you notice that there's a painted over mustache. Funny stuff. Then we go to Jack Nicholson's Joker from the 89 Batman movie. And this Joker goes a bit darker. It was a Tim Burton movie, so of course things go a little darker for the Jack Nicholson Joker. He is more of a gangster, you could say, kind of involved in that crime life within Gotham. And you do actually see his transformation in this movie, where at the chemical plant you see bullets that actually screw up his face. You see him fall into the chemicals. Of course, he survives and has his face sewn up in a way that gives him that smile look. This Joker is very Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson always plays himself, I feel like. I feel like all of his characters are very much the same. So I assume that's kind of who he really is. I don't know. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just the one character he plays. I do enjoy Jack Nicholson. I'm just saying this Joker is very Jack Nicholson. And like I said, that's not a bad thing. I do actually really enjoy his version of the gangster, mobster Joker, if you will. I enjoy his performance, and there are so many great Joker lines in this movie. You ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight? Now, moving into the animated series, Mask of the Phantasm, The Killing Joke, and various other movies and video games, we have Mark Hamill. When I was a kid, I have no idea if I knew that Mark Hamill was doing the Joker voice I was watching. I mean, he doesn't sound like Luke Skywalker, so I have no idea if I knew who that was. My dad would have been the one to tell me if I did know, but part of me thinks that I didn't know it was him until I was older. I don't remember. But there may or may not be a Joker laugh in The Last Jedi that I caught, but that's not the point. Focus. Yes, Mark Hamill is the main voice actor I think of when I think to the Joker, and I love his Joker. I was so thrilled when I heard that he and Kevin Conroy were coming back for the Killing Joke movie. That, made me fangirl like no other, because it was like they were back from the animated series or doing the Killing Joke. I was so excited. So with this Joker, you have the jokes, of course, a bit of silly laughs, but there's the darker side to him as well. I mean, this is the version of the Joker that, bitch slaps Harley when she tries to give him Batman as a gift, and even pushes her out a damn window. Okay? Bad relationship, don't like them. But anyway, that was the crazy aspect of that Joker. It was jokes and smiles, and so quickly could turn into that darker version, that full-on Joker character. Next, we have Heath Ledger from The Dark Knight. Now, people praise his performance and all of the shit ton of work that Heath put into this version of Joker, and it showed. It's an amazing performance, but once again, we see a completely different Joker. He is messy and not put together. He's scary at some points because you aren't sure what the hell he'll do next. Is he going to tell a joke or is he going to slam a guy's head into a pencil? For this, you also get the mixed backstory for the Joker. The constant question of, want to know how I got these scars? And his story changes several times in that movie. For this Joker, he does have the smile scars, but it's makeup across his face from the white and the red and so on, and with dyed green hair. This version is very much the anarchist of Gotham, just kind of wants to see the madness happen around him. Does he have a real point? I'm not really sure he does. Just to watch the world burn, perhaps. I do have to say that my favorite Joker scene in The Dark Knight is when he's dressed like a nurse and he tries to blow up the hospital, but it doesn't work at first, and so he's hitting the remote, waiting for it to blow up. I don't know. It's funny. So more recently, we have the Jared Leto Joker, and big hit or miss for people. Some people really enjoyed his version, and others were not impressed by it at all. It's, once again, very different. His look is different, still has that white skin, green hair going on, but he has tattoos all over his body. He's got gold teeth. It was definitely a new take on the character. And while we see Harley take a dip in the Ace chemicals, we don't know for sure if that's the case for this Joker yet. He has been described as slightly sort of psycho. He may have that smile on his face, but not too many jokes or silliness from this guy. He's just more crazy, psychotic, and don't do that or he'll kill you type of situation. I found Leto's Joker to be very interesting because, as I said, it was something that we hadn't really seen before for the Joker. Is it my favorite version? No, but I didn't hate it like some people did. I will say that I did enjoy seeing Joker and Harley together on the big screen. Not because they're couple goals. Dear God, people, they aren't. But just to see something that I started watching on the cartoon be translated into real life, I thought was pretty cool. So oftentimes for these different Jokers, people have put them into categories. And I kind of briefly touched on each of them, but especially online, I see these comparisons a lot because the different versions are so different from each other. So Cesar Romero is the clown Joker. Jack Nicholson is the gangster Joker. Heath Ledger is the anarchist Joker. Jared Leto is the psychopath Joker. And Mark Hamill is just simply the Joker. So that ties in with my favorite, of course. My favorite Joker is the Mark Hamill version. The cartoon version, if you will. It's been my favorite since I was a kid. I still love it today. That version and qualities of that Joker is what I think of when I think to the character. So it remains my favorite. I will just briefly mention there is a character on Gotham that a lot of people think will turn into the Joker. He has all of the potential to become the Joker, and I think he would be amazing at it. Like, hell, he's already amazing at it, and they haven't even officially announced if that's what they're going to do with the character or not. But I'm not fully caught up on Gotham, so I don't quite know for sure what they're doing right now, but I think that he would be a fantastic Joker grown up. So we'll see what they end up doing with that show. So those were my top Batman villains. He truly has the best bad guys, in my opinion. Oh, and I did have an honorable mention. The ventriloquist, at least the one from the animated series, was a super interesting and creepy villain. That was my honorable mention. So, those be my favorites. Two-Face, Mr. Freeze, Catwoman, Riddler, Penguin, Poison Ivy, Harley Quinn, Clayface, the Phantasm, and the Joker. The Batman universe, Gotham, and everything really has been a favorite of mine since I was a kid. So after doing my DC characters episode, I just really wanted to touch on how awesome some of these villains are. And I left off so many other great ones. There's like hundreds of Batman villains and so many great ones. Other heroes should, like, step up their game. Alright guys, thanks so much for listening to this episode of Chit Chat with Cass. Who is your favorite Batman villain? Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode, and I will catch you on the next Chit Chat with Cass.